One of the points that you bring up especially interests me, and especially because the Olympics has recently concluded, we've seen so many sportsmen being contributed from the state of Haryana. Does history play a role in this?
Hmm. Okay, so Haryana's sports history essentially one. See, Haryana is a land, which was at one point, one of the most marvelous lands in the, in the country. In fact, in the foreword of the book, it's clearly written that the country gets its name Bharat from a tribe which used to reside or to live in the region of Haryana. Now, from then on, and this tribe used to live on, the basin of Saraswati River. Now, following the decline of Saraswati, Haryana ended up becoming a semi-arid or arid land. However, Haryanvis were always invested. Haryanvis, there was certain section the Banyas were invested in, or the Agarwal Banyas were invested in merchant, the trading business. The Jats, Gujars, and Rhodes predominantly were agriculturists or cattle herders and things like that. But life was not tough. Life was not easy. It was pretty tough. In fact, let me tell you a story about visiting one of these guys, and I was getting into conversation with one of those people about Haryana, and he happened to weave a very magical sort of account about Haryanvis, and he said, "Okay, Haryanvis eat or the farmers eat, for their lunch, for working on fields, they would take a chapati, and they'll have some ghee, and then they'll break, smash the onion on their, elbow and break it. And with each peel of onion, they'll, relish that chapati." Now, see, when I tell this, it sounds in its own way, it sounds fascinating. It sounds interesting. But imagine it, but do look at it from the other angle also. We're talking about people who enjoy eating chapati, ghee, and just raw onion.
That's horrifying for me.
See, so this is where Haryanvis have, sort of come from.
Right.
And when I say Haryanvis, I want to say the rural people of Haryana. Not, of course, we've had big princely states also. Loharu state was connected throughout India, even to former president. And there's I don't know if you've heard of Dag Delvi or Mirza Ghalib. Both of them were associated with Haryana, connected, familial relationships in Haryana. Then, of course, the former Prime Minister also of Pakistan, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan was from Haryana as well. So all of those things existed. But at the same time, in the rural, Haryana, life was full of trials and, tribulations, limited access to water, land was arid to semi-arid. There's not, of course, there was canal network that was established, say, 700, 800 years ago, but it was still quite limited. So opportunities were less. And in order to get out of them, lift them out of these tribulations, what were the opportunities, people had? Those were limited. Now, in this setting, you bring in first the military. Their avenues on, people could just, because they're tough, they're rugged through all these tribulations. Of course, men become tough, rugged, and solid. So do women. Taking on strong roles in the, in family and society also. So essentially building both their physical attributes as well as character. And all these things fit very well first in military tradition. So you see a lot of Haryanvis have joined, military. A lot of them have joined armed forces. In fact, there are villages where, streets in the villages where each family essentially has one or two people, serving in the army or having served in the army. And you see this history right from the beginning of 19th century. You see in the 20th century also, First World War, there are many medal winners, Second World War, and so on and so forth. So immense, all those stories of guts and glory, Haryana has so many of them to present. Now, another thing happened, that what was the other opportunity available? In the other opportunity, of course, if you could study well, you would get into government jobs, you would take up a government service and things like that. But as a byproduct, all these military people, the military has always had a tradition of sports,
Right.
competitive sports, in order to boost their spirits, in order to keep them in practice and things like that, for numerous reasons. These people who were in the military, either they will play some sports and compete in sports, for example, people like Milkha Singh. But then also there were others who would probably come back to their villages and motivate young people and give them a sense of purpose and direction as to what could be done, and how they should be taking up sports and so on and so forth. So that added to the broader sense keep well, if you're rugged, if you're strong, if you're passionate, you could very well excel in sports, and sports could ensure in some way or the other some job in the army, some job in the navy, or some other government job. Now let's quickly jump into what was happening, and there are very successful sportsmen in Haryana. For example, Leela Sangwan, there's Hava Singh, among others, and who have excelled in sports in Haryana. In fact, Karna Madeshwari, who won,
Right.
I believe, in Sydney Olympics, although from South India, her husband was from Yamunanagar. I believe his name was Rajesh Singh. But what was happening in 21st century, a certain policy change came about, and taking up sports and excelling in sports started being incentivized. So if you won a medal, you would get money, or you could even get a job.
Right.
This idea was always there. Like motivation to hamesha se hua karta. There will be a lot of people. There are stories about some villager excelled in sports in some distant town or land. He would come back to the village, and village would also reward him with cans of ghee and things like that. Ghee has an important aspect. He has a very important role, in the rural training methodologies or rural training diet. But see, it always existed. But this motivation that you could be a government police officer, or you could be a government, you could become a government employee, you could become a police officer if you excelled in sports, if you could win a national medal, or if an international medal, Asia medal, Commonwealth Games medal. So if you could do it, you would one get money, or you would get a job. That was a good motivation now. So then what happened? A lot of these young kids, started filling stadiums. Right direction was given by a lot of these coaches, who would connect with them like their own, kids. The sporting culture is still running on the Guru Shishya Parampara model.
Right.
That's where, whatever you do, the Guru is just everything. You've got to follow your Guru. He will take you probably to the next step, and he'll probably connect you with who's the next person in charge. You live by what he says. You eat the food he says. Things like that. Everything. So that is what essentially happened, and as a consequence of that, you see wrestlers, you see boxers, you see kabaddi players, you see cricketers, you see javelin throwers, so on and so forth. All of them coming, doing so well because there's multiple motivation. Now, one, that you win the medal for the country and you make the country proud, your village proud, your community proud, your state proud. Two, as a byproduct of this victory, you are incentivized, you get rewarded with money, or you could be rewarded with a job. So all of that converged into a massive movement in Haryana. There are a lot of people started picking up sports, and that is the onset of the sporting journey of Haryana. And it's interesting, like 4 o'clock in the morning, you start off, visiting some place in Haryana, and on the highway only, you see young kids running at 4 o'clock in the morning, preparing themselves either for army recruitment or just getting ready to play good sports on field. So that tradition, that attitude added into the Haryanvi mindset, and as a consequence of which Haryana has sort of become such a sporting powerhouse. So much so that in say 2018 Commonwealth Games, one by third of the medals won by India were actually won by Haryanvis.
Yes.
Yes, so a great story in itself.
Right.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.